Welcome to Playing with Inference, and today we're going to talk about playful creation, or at least the version that generative AI allows us to engage with. We're going to refer to playful creation as this activity in which you're creating assets or artifacts in a very playful way, hence the name.
And today we're joined by Andy Mauro, who founded Storycraft in 2023. It's really great to see Andy. A lot of us have been in this AI games journey together, and Andy's one of the first people I met in this journey. He, prior to Storycraft, Andy worked in conversational chatbots and AI for decades, 20 years, 20 plus years, including founding and exiting a prior startup. So has plenty to teach us. He's also been a lifelong gamer. Aside from all of that, Storycraft is a social AI game that, with our topic here, lets every player be a creator. In fact, you can, once you finish listening to the podcast, go to Storycraft GG and play test it. I think you're also on the App Store now, right?
Yeah, we're doing an open alpha playtest, so anybody can try it. iOS only.
All right. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks for having me. This should be a fun one.
Nice. So, Andy, just to get started, you recently raised and surprisingly fast. How was that experience? What was the pitch? What resonated? I know we've talked before that you worked a lot on that framing. Would love to hear what was it and how do you land on that?
Yeah, hopefully none of this comes across as doing victory laps. Like the only reason to talk about this stuff is to help other founders in the trenches. It's pretty gnarly out there, right? So let me start with there's only a very limited moment in time where you successfully raise where you can actually talk about how horrible you were doing because you pulled it out. So let me try and expose the gory truth of this a little bit. So I probably ran the best process I've ever run. I had over 100 companies on my tracker. I had not missed an investor update for, 20 months since I started doing investor updates. So I was insanely committed to those. People told me that they got value out of them and that they were well done. And so I was going into it, I was like feeling really good. I'm like, I think I had about 100, maybe 90 companies that were reading my investor updates. And then I added maybe 30 new warm intros of firms that I just hadn't contacted and stuff like that. And I was feeling quite good. I had it totally organized. I was telling people that I was going to start raising after GDC in my investor updates. I thought people would be grateful that I wasn't doing it during GDC. So I was going in pretty optimistic. And then the other thing I did is I worked with a deck designer, a really good one that a friend did. It was the most organized. People knew us. They'd been following us. I thought this is going to be awesome. And then I think I ended up with something like 70 to 80 passes on no meeting, or sometimes no meeting, no deck, just, hey, we're not interested. And then also passes on the deck. The reality is that has nothing to do with you. That's 100% the market, right? If somebody doesn't even want to look at a deck or that kind of thing, I think there are serious systemic level issues going on, especially in gaming venture right now. I think people are not deploying. So you're like, okay, so 3/4 of my list is evaporated before I started fundraising. Awesome. And then I had a bunch of early calls, and there was just a lot of de-risking type behavior going on, right? Like a lot of asking for metrics that I don't think are reasonable metrics at a seed level. Now, what happened was we were really fortunate to raise from Khosla. And I think, what it did, I tell my friends, it like literally gave me faith in venture and faith in humanity to some degree, right? Because I'm sure we will get into this, but at the end of the day, what I was also like fortunate enough to talk to Vinod, and ultimately the dude lives up to the stories. Like he's looking for massive vision, massive outcomes, world changing things that benefit people and humanity, right? And our story really was one of, we have found something that a relatively small group of people, we're in like 1,000 monthly active users, and we've got dozens of people that are deeply, like hundreds of hours of gameplay engaged. Those are still pretty small numbers, right? There's no proof in that. But at the end of the day, I'll just pause so we can go back to sort of discussion. But we had a story, if we want to get into that, we can, that I think was more about the size of the opportunity, more about what happens if things go right, more about what is the earned secret? How's playful creativity impacting these people in ways that's causing them to play this pretty early, pretty broken thing. If you download it in the App Store, you'll see there's no onboarding. There's no real macro aspiration to the game. It's barely a game, to be totally honest, but you've got people spending hundreds of hours in it. Like, what's going on? And there was really leaning into what was going right, trying to understand what was going on that was causing that behavior and how you could extrapolate into the future. And so I just call that kind of visionary investors, right? And that era of VCs who are looking for really new things with really new patterns and really the potential, and where you can vaguely see the through line to a massive opportunity. And so I felt really lucky. I feel like that was an N of one opportunity in terms of being able to talk to them and really just work with a VC who was trying to understand what was going on, not judge it. They, trust me, they were super hard. They asked a lot of very hard questions and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, to Ramon's point, it was 6 days from first conversation to like safe in the inbox, right? And not many VCs have the ability and the conviction and frankly, the competence to move that fast. So at the end of the day, it was looking real bad just by the state of the market. And like these things always are, it just takes one where you really have a meeting of the minds. And so I'm really happy to be working with those guys.
It starts with the founder's conviction. And in your case, you came very prepared for this process with 100 VCs. Many of them just pass before you can show your conviction. But the important part here is that you came in with a signal, right? That you had already seen from your users some secret, some earned insight, as you call it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What was that, and how does it compare? What is that insight? What are you seeing in Storycraft and in general in AI and entertainment that really pulls out?
Yeah, I guess like without going into sort of the full pitch, I guess we started this thing like many of us, right? Like we all started around the same time. There's like AI in games, right? And everyone has their own version of it. For me, it was, we didn't talk about it much. My background is in games, right? You guys have built games. I've built games. Love games. I've been playing since Atari. Aaron outed how old I was in the intro and 20 years of working in this stuff. So I guess it's all there. And I play D&D twice a week. And actually the core insight, this is maybe interesting. This might be an interesting angle and it'd be a longer winded answer, but it's like, where do we start? A lot of us started thinking there was like this AI RPG thing, and like props to AI Dungeon folks. They're the OGs in this. But I think there was this, anyone that played D&D, there was all these angles, and our angle was not actually the experience of role play PCs. My experience was, I think I've been saying this for years, like I think the core of humanity is, this is like the best of D&D is like the best of best of family, it's the best of company building, it's the best of sports, which is to say it's a group of people. Each one of them is special and unique in their own way, right? We'll use D&D dorky stuff. We've got healers, we've got like close combat, far combat, we've got some spellcasters, fighters, clerics, whatever. And so you get to be special, literally baked into the class of your character, but you get to work together in service of this larger mission. I'm lucky enough to play some great groups who we are completely dedicated to. We're going to play this campaign for years, and what we're going to walk out of is an incredible story and the memories of that story. So people, no murder hobos allowed, right? It's like we're dedicated to the story, not just dice chucking. Everyone role plays full voices. If that stuff ever got on the internet, I just feel like I'd be ruined. That's actually not true, but now it'd probably be credibilizing, to be totally honest. But so I looked at that, and my co-founder, Adam, also a big D&D guy, and we were like, there is a social experience at the heart of D&D that has never really been captured. Forget about the mechanics, forget about the gameplay, forget about the systems. There's a social experience where, in a way, you get to be more vulnerable through role play. You get to show more of yourself because you have the plausible deniability of I'm just this dick warlock or whatever. And the real you comes through. And then other people accept you, they validate you, they love the character you play, and blah, blah, blah. And you have this great experience. And it's really connecting, right? It's massively connecting. And so we came into this thinking maybe there's something we can do in that zone. That was our inspiration for what we were going to build. And of course, a lot of it around the AI was UGC based. We were like, it just feels, could this be a time where players could create a lot more, exercise their creativity in the same way that you exercise creativity in D&D. The story goes, if you have a really great DM, we always have our DM, we are shaping the story with her, right? That's a very vague idea to start with, but there was a core experience, social experience, community experience that we wanted to capture, and a set of people to be creative together. That was the sort of core experience goal that we were always after. And it was really just, we want people to have fun being creative and telling stories together. That's what we said from day one. And so we didn't know what form that would take. But early on, we thought it might be RPG, right? Because we were inspired by D&D, so we thought it might be that. And I think you saw a lot of people try that. And I think very quickly what we discovered, you probably could have thought your way to this, but RPGs are mostly about player progression, right? At a mechanical level, they're almost all about play. And so a lot of people made this mistake that you go, RPGs are about story. You're like, kinda, but mechanically they're about player progression. And there's nothing, I don't think, particularly suited to AI around player progression. And so we abandoned that. And so what we did, a couple things, we put this out quite early. And this is, I'm only learning like a thing people in games don't really do. So you're like, you're in the app store. I'm like, yeah, we're not launched. We don't put any money behind UA, but we found ways to get to 1,000 monthly actives and grow that over time. It's very helpful to build with real data, I find. And I know I'm a gamer, like I don't want to play a half-baked piece of shit. But the thing is, we put it out. And when we put it out we put it in the app store late Jan. And then we raised obviously like in March at GDC. So it was out for a couple of months basically. But we actually put it out in a closed alpha, like via test flight in, I think, October. Mm-hmm. And this is a fun day, right? The very first day, I remember it was for some reason October 24th, we put it out. The very first day, we had a player play for like 12 hours. I think it was only one person, but we were like, what is up with her? That's crazy. And so then of course, you immediately reach out to these players who are playing for a lot of time. And right out of the gate, we heard this thing of just, this was a creative person. She thought of herself as a writer. She was capturing stories that were in her head. And she was just loving it. And then right away, it was like this slow trickle. Like basically every few days we were adding another player that was just putting like hours and hours on the board. And we're to the point that we were seeing like 100 hours in like the first couple of weeks of play with some of these people. We're like, this is very unusual, even though the numbers were small. And then the key is that you have to talk to them. The earned insight is going to come from talking to these people. And then we put in the app store, we got a much bigger flux of those people coming in. And all of a sudden we're like, okay, so I should know the exact number. It's not big enough that I can't count it. It's in the few dozen people that have now put hundreds of hours in a month or two of gameplay. And so when you talk to these people, I'm going to tell, this is my fundraising story because I think this is a story that encapsulates what we did. Is we have this thing where like, okay, it's really cool that first of all, we build no content. And so I have this nice little business slide that says we're the first game company that has zero labor costs for content production. People perk up at that. That's a colossally massive business idea, right? But none of that matters at this stage, unless people love it. And I think what I'm trying to say to you is clearly some people truly love it. And that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to build something that people love, not that they like, that they totally love. And so we had found some of those people. And then you can try and tell that story in aggregate, but maybe this is a fundraising technique too. I think part of it is about empathy. I chose to tell it in one person, right? And so we had this one player, she had played over 200 hours in a couple months, and we went to her and said, like, why are you playing this game for so long? And she said, she gave us this very emotional story that was very helpful. It happens to be true, right? She said, I was 17 when I had my first kid. I thought I was going to do creative work, maybe writing or art, and that didn't happen for me. And she said, this game has completely reconnected me to my idea of being a creative person. And so that's the earned insight. The earned insight is that maybe this is a little bit of belief. I think everyone's creative. I'm an optimist. We're all founders. We're probably all super openly psychological optimists, right? And so I think everyone's creative. I think we lose it. Every kid finger paints and draws and does that kind of stuff, and we lose it along the way. And I think the ability to connect someone to that feeling of being a creative entity, but even more than that, connecting them in a way where they feel talented. They don't just experience, like anybody can go to one of those painting or pottery classes and do it badly, right? And go, that was fun. But the difference is she came out of it and all of our players walk out of it thinking they were going to play a game. And then they end up with this thing that they're like, I'm like actually pretty proud of that. And then because it's fully multiplayer, networked, you can travel between players' worlds, anybody can see each other's stuff, and you have some social capability built in for people to acknowledge and validate these other people. Not only do you have a great time, build something you're proud of, and then other people acknowledge you and are also happy for you. That's the D&D experience I'm talking about. Completely different product. Has nothing to do with it. It's a social crafting game. Plays a little bit more like an Animal Crossing than just about anything else, maybe. So I think that was the earned secret. And I think the trick there is that we locked into something early on that was true at a human level. that sort of social creative thing that happens in D&D, and we always kept that experience in mind, but which we knew was true. Like, we knew that was true. We didn't have to validate whether that was true, but then we really had to shift the product and technology focus to find that thing. And then I think the other part is that old, I've never been through YC, but I had friends who went through it when Sam Altman was there. And I remember them telling me a story. They went into office hours with him and he was like, I can't help you if you're not live. And I always thought that was like a little extreme, like almost dogmatic. But now I feel like I get it. If we hadn't put our absolute piece of crap out there, we wouldn't have discovered the one person who played it for a dozen hours. And in talking to her, we wouldn't have then been able to refine and double down on the direction that got us to dozens of those people. And the trick is, now you have to figure out, is that a niche product or is that a mass product? And I think that early group, it's always so hard to tell how much you listen to them versus you don't. And it's like, you really have to listen for the signal in the noise, because those hardcores are probably not your mass audience exactly, but there's parts of them that are your mass audience. And so that's the stage we're at now, which is, we've got all this great feedback, which is a gift. Some startups, I've been at startups where it's hard to even get that feedback. And it's now we have this wellspring of feedback, and now it's like sifting through it and being really careful about what we take in and what we don't take in. So I'd be interested in your guys' part of that too. I find that to be one of the hardest parts of this whole game, is what feedback do you listen to and what feedback do you not?
Absolutely. We started playtesting with externals with something 4 months into founding the company, because as a game designer, you have a concept, but it's not until you actually put it in the hands of others and you see what they do with it that you start getting the feedback cycle going. And I think it's an art. There is a certain part where you have to listen to what people say they want, and then based on what you think you can do as a team and what you start to see, you're like, okay, this is what they really want, or this is what I can really deliver. We've had a few other interesting experiences. It goes both ways, right? So one of the motivations for building Retail Mage was partly because, so we had this early demo that we didn't put out publicly, and an idea that many people have had in the AI game space, like a murder mystery, and we decided we'll make it as a heist, right? But it's still kind of a mystery like thing, and so we had this little area, and we had a couple different scenarios. You're either to stop the heist or help the heist, and we have our AI characters. You can interact with things, and one thing we found is that some players, when they came in, because there was just enough traditional game mechanics that you had to like get the key from the guard, and then you had to do this and you had to do that they just focused in on hit the buttons, what's the logic puzzle, here we go.
Yeah.
Put all of the other creative side part aside. And that was one of our motivations, was figuring out, okay, where do we find the blend working with players to find traditional game mechanics and this kind of creative aspect that allows, because we had other folks who at some point would just ignore the heist altogether, and they just go off. And those are the ones that did put in the time, right? Because the heist mechanics are really simple. It's a traditional game. But the ones that were like, oh, I'm talking to the security guard about like her work-life balance at this point, right? Or are like engaging in conspiracy theories amongst all the other people in the heist to try to throw them off. Those are the ones that found something. And that's where we started to go, is okay, how do we keep unlocking that kind of experience? Where do we go with that? And Retail Mage was a bit of a kind of attempt to try to find, how do we find a hybrid between them? I think we actually even want to do more of the creative, but we wanted to establish early on that you can bring some of these things together. It's not easy.
I think that point you're making, like, I'm probably being way too open on this thing, but it's like, I joked with one investor. I said we were saved by our own ineptitude, because the honest to God truth is, I don't know how to build games. I haven't done that. I wouldn't hire myself to be the CEO of a games company. Luckily, with a little bit of new cash, I'm going to be able to bring in somebody who's really excellent at making games. We've got a new hire we're going to bring in soon. But what I have been good at is like figuring out the edges and shape of how you use current AI technology to build a pragmatic product, like not a pie in the sky product, right? Mm-hmm. That was a lot of the feedback we got, actually, was there's a lot of people doing tech demos and concepts and wowie stuff, but like a thing we share between you guys and us is we ship something, right?
Yes.
And we got real feedback, right? And So I think that's another thing is just shit. But I think that balance between traditional game and the new things. So when I say we were saved by our own ineptitude, like there's no game in it. You're only left with the creative self-expression pillar of what we've built. And so for the people who show up with ideas, DMs, fanfic writers, artists, world builders, these are all the people that are playing for hundreds of hours. They show up with a bunch of creativity. That's clearly not going to be a totally mass audience, but I think there's lots of ways to walk people into creativity through more traditional game mechanics. But that balance of not killing the new with the old, that's so tricky. It's so tricky, but that's part of the fun of it.
So what do you think this user of yours that you use for your persona in your framing?
Yeah.
What did they find? What did they find in Storycraft that allowed them to reconnect with their artistic side that didn't exist before? Because arguably the world is not short on creative endeavors and hobbies and whatnot.
Totally. That's a great question. So the other thing we do, which is just a tactic, is I use the superhuman product market fit survey. That's the sort of how disappointed would you be if you couldn't play Storycraft question. But then you also have to ask them other questions. And one of those is, what do you get out of Storycraft that you don't get out of other games? And then how could we make it better for you? And so that's been very helpful, right? We actually put like a link to a crappy Google Doc survey in the game, right? Like it's very janky, but we got enough of that we got some signal. And that question, like that survey, we have people in the Discord, so we have direct access to people now. Small Discord, I don't know, 800 people or something, but enough that we have direct access and we can ask them. So that's the source of how we got the answer to the question that you asked, which is, if I was to distill it down to just one sentence, it's probably not quite enough granularity. Everyone talks about creativity, freedom, and bringing their imagination to life, right? And so I think the freedom question is actually, I just went before I said I should probably just go refresh that. I thought you guys might ask something in that. So I went and looked through it. And that was what I took away in just a quick scan again. I was like, oh, bringing my imagination to life is a hackneyed phrase. And so I'm like, what does that tell me? Not a lot, which I get it. It's okay, but am I not bringing my imagination to life in Minecraft or Animal Crossing or The Sims? Like I'm bringing my imagination to life in some way. So when I sift through that index on the word freedom, right, which is certain genres of games have always indexed on the amount of freedom. Like we all played Baldur's Gate to death, I'm sure, and we all felt, wow, it really feels, I know this is constrained, but it really feels like incredibly wide open. More of the best D&D video game of all time. Why? Because it felt free. And so I think it's the freedom question. It's the freedom of expression. It's, can I make that? The answer is yes. And so the other thing you look for in startups, I think, right, is what's the 10x better? And we, I don't know what you guys, I've deluded myself many times into what was probably a 1.25x. That's 10x, right? I think it actually is a 10x improvement over any type of crafting game if you can literally make anything you want. Now, it comes with all kinds of technical constraints. Is it 3D? No, we're 2D. Can I walk in these things? Are they, like, there's all kinds of constraints. But when you make it and it pops, we all know this is, I think the early version of AI figured out two things. And I think this is what it boils down to. ChatGPT figured out right away that it is not a Go engine. It is not a search engine. It is a bi-directional conversation in which you refine your mutual understanding of what it is that you're talking about to get to truth or a better answer, right? Sycophantic truth about how great you are. These recent prompts, right? But that was the new feeling, right? That's where a guy who worked in chatbots forever, I was like, oh my God, this shit actually finally works, right? I can actually go back and forth and refine. It's not just a do engine. Then Midjourney, I think, figured out right out of the gate, humans building in public helps the humans get smarter faster. Right. So one is your relationship with the AI to come up with ideas. And then the other one is seeing how other people interact with the AI to steal their ideas. Right. And ultimately, that's what we ended up building. Right. Which is you're talking to AI NPCs. They're giving you ideas about what you might make. But then you travel into other players' worlds in a completely network thing. And you go, oh my God, you can make gates. Oh, you can make fences. Oh, I didn't think that I could make a fence like that. I have no fence like primitive. And that push-pull pattern of the AI giving you ideas and helping you be smarter and other people's use of the AI also helping you, I think that becomes, you ask the question, how did it make her creative. There's no shortage of creative tools. And I've asked myself this question many times too. Why didn't she just go to Midjourney and make a bunch of characters, or she could make a storybook of her worlds, right? That never even occurred to her. And so why does it need to be? I have two answers to the question. I think it has to be a game, because people approach games through the lens of, the idea of self-doubt doesn't even hit you when you're playing. This goes back to your playful creativity, right? My energy is not focused inward on my own limitations or my own ideas. I don't have any blank page limitations in a game. I only have what's going to happen. And I think we would all build better companies if we build cultures that felt like that too, right? Like, we're just sitting here going, what's going to happen? What could we do? And so the game frees these people from the creative blank page problem of where they approach it from a self-doubt. People have literally said that to us. So much easier than writing. I don't have time to write, but I love Storycraft. We've literally heard that. I'm like, you guys play hundreds of hours. You have lots of time to write if you want to write. So I think that's part of it, is that the game unlocks creativity because it's playful. And then I think the second part, and this maybe you guys can help me with, actually, I don't know. Why does it need to be this embodied game world? Like, we could just be building a novel AI type thing where you're literally telling written and visual stories, or a storybook generator. There's something about the embodied space of games that I would love your guys' thoughts on this. The only thought I have on it is that we're spatial creatures, and there's something about embodied space that helps. I feel like right now the game lets you create a set and cast the characters, but nothing happens yet. That's kind of the stage of where Storycraft is at. Obviously, that hints to where Roadmap would bring us to. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
I think both the has to be a game and the has to be embodied hit on the iteration side that makes it very attractive. I think what makes playful creation with generative AI very attractive is that it's a super fast iteration cycle. No, I want moss in my walls, and now add like a toucan on top, and you're really quick at arriving to what you have in your mind with the freedom that you were talking about. But what I found in the first game that I put out was that there's this friction of a blank text box, right?
Yeah.
And the further away you get from that blank text box writer's block, the better. And what sort of helps, it helps to be embodied. It helps to make it a game. If it's fast paced, it also helps. So for example, I've played, you guys probably know Tyler from Wonderheart, and they're doing their own AI dungeon, or not AI D&D platform. And one of the things I really liked was they have the game's ticking even if you haven't put anything in. So that pressure of the world continues without you forces you to give yourself away. So I think there is always some self-doubt, even when you come to games, that appears when you see a blank text box like a prompt. But the more gamey, the more you need to do it now, the more embodied, the easier you are to jump.
If you think even going to Minecraft is an easy option, but Minecraft creative mode typically is not the super flat level, right? That's a pretty advanced usage of Minecraft,
totally.
Right? It's the same kind of blank page space of give someone a space that gives them constraints, gives them something to bounce off of, gives them something to be like, I don't like that tree there, so we're going to get rid of it. Or Animal Crossing, it's like, the place is a mess, I'm going to make it nicer now. Lets you immediately get going, reduces that friction, gives goals. I think it's interesting that you mentioned freedom and be able to create anything. But in some ways, that's at tension with what a game often is, right? Because arguably any freedom means that it's not to say that we can't do collaborative storytelling and we have a sandbox and we can do anything. But most ways we think of games tend to provide some sort of constraints or structures. And that constraint fires that creativity. So instead of just being like in Baldur's Gate or something, I just fly right over the castle walls, or I just example, in most of pretty early AI-based games that are usually text-based, or anything that would allow me to give inputs in, one of the tests I would often do would be, can I get the AI system can I convince it that I'm waking up from a dream? Can I completely take out the context that was provided of whatever the designer or scenario designer said and say, oh, that was a dream, I can do anything now. And if it lets me do that, then there's no constraints whatsoever. where we can play around in this space, but I'm not constrained by any particular rules. So for you, Andy, like, where does freedom and where do rules from a game meet?
Such a juicy question. I'm going to start off slightly oblique. Surprise. The thought I have on this, as someone who loves games and I think is like a student of games, even though I'm very much an amateur as a builder, is that scarcity has served sort of two purposes in games. And the first is very natural and good, right? And which is to say, humans have a natural desire to overcome certain types of challenges, fighting, for example, in games, or competition in games, or dealing with survival crafting, which is literally scarcity, or survival horror, which is scarcity. These are fun. These are natural to the environment of the game and the theme that you're playing, and they're not tacked on. But I also think there's a whole layer of mechanics and systems and excuses for certain types of themes that is born out of a false scarcity, or scarcity, which is economic, which is games cost a lot to make and you actually can't open them up. You have to have pinch points and you have to have retries and you have to have death in order for them to have enough content. And actually, I'll use a very specific example. One of our very first earliest players who played a lot was actually an old DM, right? Most of our audience is like 20 to 40-year-old, skews 60, 70% female, as you might expect. But we have 18-year-old boys playing with their girlfriends, and we have 67-year-old DMs playing. This DM guy I said, dude, like, why are you just not playing Baldur's Gate? What are you doing playing this, us, Storycraft? And he said, listen, he goes, to be honest, he goes, if I could just walk through the entire Baldur's Gate game and talk to every NPC and check out every interior, and he goes, that's all I want. But they make me play the game to do that. And I'm like, because Baldur's Gate that game is massive. It might be a few hours of experience anyway, just walking through and talking to everyone and see, but you'd churn through it quick, right? Wouldn't be worth the $80. And so that second type of scarcity, and there's not a concrete idea here, so like a set of ideas, but what we're starting to think through, which is really like a joy for someone that loves games. I'm like, you know what? Maybe for the first time, nobody knows the answer. And so even though I don't know what I'm doing, I can actually just think my way to some cool shit, right? Which is, what is the role of, I think AI is fundamentally about abundance, like just philosophically almost, right? And I think in games, it will also bring a certain type of abundance. Very specifically in a crafting game, our game is not about working through a progression crafting tree, and you can make anything. So what happens now? And so we can't use the traditional mechanics of just letting, in Animal Crossing or any of these games, you just work your way through finding all the resources, unlocking all the tools, and then you have an elder game where you have full creative power, right? What happens when you have full creative power out of the gate? You have to think about the mechanics and how you create long-term value in a game very differently than just letting people unlock the content. And so I think when people are talking about freedom, I think that's part of it. It's like, I am not feeling the typical scarcity mindset that most games put me in. And to be honest, until we started working on this game, I'm not sure I even looked at games as coming from a scarcity mindset. And so as society shifts into abundance mindset through AI, if you're all techno optimists like we are, right? It's like, a lot of things change. And I think this game and games in general are also going to have an opportunity to build from a place of abundance and come up with mechanics and systems that are born of abundance. I know that's a very vague thought, but I think it has real concrete, specific implications. And I think giving gamers that, you might even argue, that sense of freedom that we've always wanted in games is somewhat born of that rejection of scarcity, right?
Wouldn't this rejection of scarcity, or this like games where the content is out there in like at the beginning for you off the bat, just be sandbox? So you were talking about Minecraft creator mode. For me, my example of removing the constraints was when I was a kid. I played SimCity, and I changed from one computer to the other with changing my save with a floppy disk, and I introduced some error which ended up with me infinite money. And I played a lot more SimCity.
Solid.
Because now I could just destroy and redo, and I would have like cities that just like one road that would snake, and I would say, what happens if I do this?
Love that.
But for that to work, it's like SimCity is very sandboxy, right? There's a lot of systems that allow you to like experiment and derive fun from that. So for me, like what it sounds is what you're saying if you were, when you're saying coming without the scarcity mindset, sounds to me like basically you want to create sandboxes and then add some other constraints if you want, but at a core you want sandbox type environments, right?
I think that's true. I think what we have right now is definitionally a sandbox. That's all there is really to it. People are creating their own meaning out of it. It's an interesting question though, because I think part of what we're also talking about is these sandboxes. What are the ultimate examples? Minecraft, probably GTA in a
Gary's
way,
mod.
Gary's mod. A lot of them have focused on the crafting part. At least let's take them. They're probably in two different areas. There's the crafting part, which is Minecraft, right? So creative mode, I can make anything, right? And then I'm not sure actually where my thinking is on something like GTA, where that's clearly more story driven. Like that is more people coming up with narratives, sort of GTA role play. So the sandbox is this realistic, semi-realistic contemporary environment where I can tell stories. And so like some days I wake up and I love the name of my company, and sometimes I wake up and I go, man, you really just hit it on the nose too much, like it's corny. But I think it really was intentional, and it really was like the story and the craft part. Like I think we've gotten very good at the Lego block craft version of it.
Yeah.
And I think we've been much less good at the story sandbox element of it. Like you can't make a character in Minecraft. Someone said that to us about a game. Like, why do you like this more in Minecraft? They're like, I can make characters. Very simple, right?
So if you were gonna do, we're gonna emphasize more the story. Do you think there you have to abandon there, how to say this, the abundance mindset? As in, I understand when crafting you want a sandbox, but I would imagine that for stories, at least for Western stories, you often need a lot of tension, like
Yeah.
tension and release, and tension often comes from constraints and scarcity and so on and so forth.
I think this is very good thinking. I agree. I think how do you solve that was what Aaron was saying. Like, how do you solve this tension between freedom and constraint? And some of the best creativity comes from constraint, and some of the best drama comes from constraint. And so I think these are unanswered questions. I think what we have seen, to say what we have seen so far, and I don't think it's the full answer. I think we need more narrative structure and more, really, there's almost no story in Storycraft right now. Like I said, it's sets and casted characters, but not a lot happens yet. There's another version of this though, which is kids at play. And I don't think that's our market exactly. So we're not really a kids game, but I do think this is why I think D&D is also in the mix for people somehow. Like, I think what hell is that you have to listen to other people talk about their D&D stories, right? It's like,
all inside.
There's nothing less interesting than that. It's like somebody else's vacation photos, right? And so it has immense meaning to the group, the 6 people that played it, and almost zero meaning for anyone else, right? And so now I think there's interesting things. What about folks watching Critical Role? That has meaning for other people, but that's because it's become a performance. But I think the key here is a story doesn't have to have. I said I was going to walk away learning something about my own business talking to you guys, right? I think this is what's coming through for me, Ramon. It's like the layer of meaning related to story when it's done socially is the social meaning of the story. Meaning we all had a great time. Remember what Aaron did, remember what Ramon did in that when that happened. I think you see that happen in Fortnite and other things. Like those are stories, right? They're sports stories effectively, right? Because they're competition oriented. In terms of like narrative, traditional narrative, I actually don't think they have to be that good. So, you just have to feel like they're good, and they often feel like they're good when they're doing them with friends. So I think there's something in there, right? They don't have to be 10 out of 10.
I want to add on that a bit because we've talked about a couple of things. We've had procedural narrative in a certain way in the game industry. A classic example would be Wildermyth. Was usually held up as a game that kind of helped build the procedural narrative. And there's other examples. We can look at like emergent storytelling that comes from games like Dwarf Fortress and other types of, there's a whole industry of games there where there's a combination of procedural generation, but a lot of the narrative is interpreted through the lens of the player, right? They add a layer of meaning on top of it. I think that what we do get with one possibility with generative AI technology is that we add a new type of procedure that we didn't before. So I think that generative dialogue is a prerequisite for a number of new type of gameplay that we have. It is not on its own sufficient, I think, for a new game. Just adding in chatbots is interesting. And yes, if I could go around Baldur's Gate and I could talk to everybody about what they have for breakfast and about their cousin and everything else, which can be interesting. You'd never make it through Act 3, but you could be interesting. But I think what it does is that's one thing we could not easily, coherently generate before. I could generate NPCs, I could generate levels, I could generate quests. The quality of them is different. And I think with generative AI, we can even get better quality of all things. But the one thing I couldn't do easily is generate dialogue. And that unlocks now generating narrative. We are still learning how to do it, but I think there will be something that will get there. What's also interesting, though, Andy, that you've brought up a couple of times, and that I'm not sure I hear enough folks in this space talking about, is the social aspect. At Jam&T, we started out as a multiplayer company foundationally. And one of the things that we looked at with both from a fundamental conviction is that there's a lot of generative AI that I think you have people telling these stories. And we have some folks that I think it's an interesting conversation of folks that are concerned that by creating, even just with ChatGPT, let alone in games, these solo worlds that you could get lost in them, that will actually make people more isolated, right? So I don't need to deal with real reality. I can now craft this own reality that's perfect for me, and I can deep dive into this never-ending story. Yeah. But what we were looking at was, again, a lot of the D&D background. How do we jump past that into immediately shared storytelling? The insight for us that we're looking is one of the challenges, going straight back to D&D, is so freedom in games. Talk about sharing maybe insights we may or may shouldn't share. Freedom in games is usually single player. In games, not to say there isn't more freedom we can do, but again, Baldur's Gate, like how many more endings do I need before I feel like I need more? A lot of single player games give us at least the illusion of a lot of high player agency. Multiplayer games reduce that agency, right? If I'm in World of Warcraft, if only one person can take out the Lich King, like that's really cool, right? But all the rest of us, what are we doing? So in a multiplayer game, you can't all be the hero of the ages,
yeah,
right? But in D&D, you can. And the reason is you have a master storyteller, or hopefully, right, sitting at the table, or they're doing their best they can, who can take individual stories at the table and weave them together so that everyone feels a little bit like a hero. And one of our ideas is that this is only possible with an engine that can synthesize narrative to make all the people at the table start to feel like the protagonist. One of the things we failed at Retail Mage, honestly, is even though we have multiplayer in there, it was really interesting. One of my takeaways is we have multiplayer, but we don't really easily allow people to see what others have done. Like hoping we'd see maybe more streaming or in our Discord. So a lot of the discoveries, the creative discoveries, go unshared. When someone has an interesting idea, they're like, oh, I solved the problem with this customer this way. So we didn't put into Retail Mage an easy way to share those explorations. But that is definitely an insight that I think is really important that you've.
But you had a little bit of that at the end, right? Like at the end of Retail Mage, you have the reviews, which honestly I enjoyed so much. Like
yes, you do, but it's within your session, right? Like we don't have a way that it's the most, and that would be on us. Maybe like even editorially, we could say the most creative way that someone solved the problem this week was X or Y, right? That's something for us to invest in. That Storycraft you've baked in, but I totally believe in it. I totally see it because there's also learning to be creative from one another, right? We riff off of each other. The number of times that I've sat down with folks and again, like you tell them a story and they're like, oh, I never even thought that I could go and do, and suddenly they're coming up with ideas that you wouldn't have come up with, right? So getting people together. Retail Mage is a very small multiplayer, up to 4 players. I think the more we throw and share this creativity, we'll unlock it even faster.
Do you think these social aspects amplify the meaning that you put into the creation, the story, or the game, or whatever? Or is it more about just the extra fun that the people are? How much is it like? The reason I ask is because I was writing. The first thing I started doing with DALL-E and ChatGPT or GPT-3 was like I was doing fan fiction. Like I was starting doing my own story about the revolution in Morrowind. Very bad, but I loved it.
Yeah.
But I wonder if I had done that in a more social environment, finding some other guy that wants to create fan fiction about Morrowind, would that have been more interesting to me? Because I agree that you don't care about the stories of other people, but I actually think that it's more because you created them and not necessarily because there was a social aspect to it. But maybe I'm not doing.
I think there's more. I think these are yes and 100%. Like yes, social storytelling matters more, and yes, having other people see your stuff and it is rewarding. I think there's lots of paradigms though, right? And one of them that we see, for example, is we have probably the world's worst like multiplayer capability right now, which is anybody can walk into anyone else's world. There is no way to have a private world. And if you want to have a shared world, meaning you can all craft in it, there is literally one toggle, no friends. It's just completely open, right? So that's going to be like troll nightmare at any level of scale, but it's not a current problem, right? And so a thing that you see happen all the time is people will set up a shared world and then in the Discord be like, hey, I just created a shared world. Somebody like did this the other day. I was astounded, said, hey, I created this world, swamp bayou kind of world. Let's pretend they're filming a horror movie there. Go. And it was just like, then this whole thing emerged. And there's something really interesting that happens. Like in Mid-Journey, you're going, oh, I can add Unreal 5 and all of a sudden I get this glossy, like people got this sort of functional tactical thing. And they would get ideas maybe for, oh, that's cool, let me do that. And you would see these little memes happen where it would be like hillbilly Batman, and then everyone do every hillbilly superhero. So people would get ideas from each other like that, but they were solo play ideas. They were functional and creative riffs that you then went off and you got inspired by someone else, but it didn't come back necessarily. And what we see, let's take this Bayou horror movie thing. Somebody comes in and drops the monster. Now that's the monster. But if somebody else wanted, oh, I don't like that monster, so I'm going to put another monster. Now there's 2 monsters. And what happens is this very yes, Andy thing. Nobody can come in. What doesn't happen at all right now, just because the people are all friends, nobody comes in and deletes the other person's monsters, says, fuck you, there's only one monster in this movie. It's like everyone is yes, anding. And the creativity is, it's more than just I saw an image, I got another idea for an image. The idea is I saw an image, or I saw the world, or I saw this thing, and all of a sudden my concept of this entire story that's happening in our heads is expanding. Something very rewarding about that. And so, yeah, I think it's creating together. This when I say it, like, what are we doing right now? Like, why didn't we just do this on email? We're creating together. We're listening to each other. We're hopefully the conversation is going in. Humans love this. I personally think it's just because it's idea sex, right? We're literally just serving some exterior, I don't know. My wife would just say it's our gut biome, right? Our gut biome is just trying to make everything happen. But it's like, why are we compelled to do this? Nobody's going to, let's be honest. You guys, like, who's going to watch this podcast? You guys are not big yet, right? It's like, we're doing this for this moment right now where we're creating together. Humans are very invested in that. And so I think the more ways we can create, and so I think just the pure intrinsic joy of creating together, and this is going to sound so naive, I've been saying this since day one. I love dopamine. Everyone loves dopamine. We should all create products that are based on dopamine, right? That's good to a degree. But like, also, if we're going to be techno optimists, I also believe that we can build technology that elevates people into their better natures and still be the most greedy, money grubbing capitalists ever too at the same time. Like, people love dopamine, but you know what they also love? You know why we have families? You know why we like, it's because we love oxytocin and serotonin too. We love connection and we love purpose, right? That's actually way more motivating than dopamine, but we don't try that hard as technologists to give people that. And dopamine is a great sled into oxytocin and serotonin, right? And I think we could do that more. And I think this is the space we're actually touching. Creativity with others, building things with others is at least partly the meaning of life. It's probably not the whole thing, but it's at least partly it. And if you can give people that feeling, I think when this, young woman said to us too, I had my kid young, and the work that I think what she's really saying is I didn't get the work that I wanted. I didn't get the purpose, that part of purpose that would have been work. I didn't get that. And that's the feeling she's getting when she says it connects me to myself as a creative person. And so I think I'm quite optimistic. Like when I talk about AI abundance, like this is the kind of stuff you couldn't build a video game that let people do this before, because you couldn't have enough assets. And so we got stuck in this decoration and placement. This is what you can do. And now that you can have anything, like, how do we create these experiences for people that tap them into that sense of abundance? And I believe, I really like what you said, but you get connected to this idea of no constraints and freedom. And like, what are people about? Give people abundance so that they can have freedom. And once they have freedom, what do they do with that freedom? Like they become themselves. And when they become themselves and show themselves to the world, tends to appreciate that. Right. And so I think all of these creative tools are giving people the ability to show themselves to the world in a way that the world reacts to it. It sounds very airy-fairy, I realize, but I really believe we can build better products now, real products that are genuinely good for humanity, right?
It really resonates with a lot of what we've been thinking too. Fanfiction is we've brought up a couple times, is a great example of this, particularly of abundance too, and the social aspects of it, right? There are ways we've created markets where we try to actually reduce this, right? We don't want the forking of the ideas. We don't want the wiki of ideas. It's all I got my page. We're all going to be on the same thing. And we find other creative mediums and environments that allow people to riff off of each other, to allow people to stand on the shoulder of giants and take ideas off of each other. Going to the D&D example, some of the best moments are usually not, I sat there and came up with the exact right story. It's because someone else at the table had a crazy idea, and then someone else has another idea. And next thing you're on like several steps beyond that, where everyone's laughing and everyone's having a great time, which of course, again, now you can't tell no one's going to sit there and listen to this story later. But in the moment, it was incredible. And having this medium and capability where we unleash and we're less concerned around restricting that ability, I think it's powerful because again, we've lowered the cost. We have both the tools and we've lowered the cost to enable that. And I think there's something there. What is a lot of D&D other than a bunch of fantasy fanfic being created come together, right? And so being able to create together, being able to connect through, that is, to be frank, a lot. We founded Jam and Tea not purely on the idea of, hey, AI is the thing we're good at. We had a broader mission of how we want to use games to bring people together, to create a sense of belonging, to combat the crisis of loneliness, right? Through play, through this medium that we have. We just think that we just happen to have, in a moment of time, a technology that lets us do this potentially better than we've ever done before. We're really excited about that.
I think one of the things, hearing you guys talk about this narrative together, this building together, creating together, it feels, now that I'm thinking about it, it feels like with all my group of friends, you have some sort of inner lore. And if I tell anybody outside of my group, of that specific group of friends, oh, the time when Jorge did blah, 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 they're not going to care. It's a stupid story. Yes, he got drunk and he did that, but nobody cares. But when I talk to Jorge and our group of friends, it's such a funny thing that we get to retell and relive, and it feels like our little secret. I imagine, because I haven't played D&D, only Baldur's, but not like human. I imagine that's a type of feeling you end up getting, right? Like it's a secret that you tell, it's a secret lore that you have for your group of friends that you get to read.
I think it's deeper than, yes, 100%. And I love where this conversation is going, just to acknowledge Aaron too. Yeah, there's like a bunch of us now. This isn't, I think you said you had Nabil on, like Nabil had a great founders dinner at GDC of AI game founders. And that was awesome. And like, there is more of this kind of talk outside of this, right? Where people are, yes, of course, we're all trying to build colossal businesses. And yes, we're all trying to do that. But I think there's actually this belief that there's something under this that's going to allow us to build products that connect more. And this is, I'm a big horror movie fan, right? I always hated those people that be like, it's a thriller. I'm like, no, it's a fucking horror film. The point is, we're trying to make games. I'm not apologizing for that. I love games. Games are incredible, right? Games to me have been a way to connect to another intelligence, especially around these sort of iconic game designers, right? Because it's a way of expressing yourself, just like writing. It's just different. The contours of it feel different to connect to that intelligence, right? Games, full stop, no apologies, doesn't have to be better than games. But I actually think there is this opportunity for these products to propel us into a new zone, right? And this is like a little heady, but like most of us, maybe not Ramon, but close, is like we're old enough to remember, like we were some of the first PC people, right? And it was like, holy shit, I have computation at home. Right. And then the web comes around, you're like, wait a second, I don't need to get in Best Buy. Like I have distribution from my house. That's crazy. And then mobile came along, and I think we all thought it was something, but and these reductive things never quite work. But I think mobile is largely turned out to be about consumption in your pocket, consumption out of home. Of course, there's more than that. But I think AI is turning out, and I think this surprised, I don't know if it surprised you guys, but as a guy who was nominally like working in AI conversation stuff for 20 years, it legitimately surprised me that it came for creative jobs first. Programmers, writers, authors. And I'm actually excited about that. I'm like, this next wave of like macro decades in the making wave is actually about creativity and creation, is incredibly exciting. And so around this idea of what do players create when they play D&D together, yes, they create a story. Yes, they create a set of narratives. Yes, they create a set of moments. Just like kids playing Fortnite, remember when so-and-so did such and such, or in a Minecraft realm or whatever. We all create these moments. I think this is deeper than that, though. I think the true thing, and I'll tell you, like, I started a D&D campaign during the pandemic. All brand new people, had never met in person, played an entire Curse of Strahd campaign over like about 3 years. We played our last 3 sessions at a cool like house and kind of cottage in upstate New York where we all met for the first time. Like, some of these people are some of the best friends I have ever had in my life, and they know me and I know them in ways that I bet you people outside of this D&D group don't know. There's something about make-believe and playing and pretending that sometimes allows a human being to show a part of themselves that they don't get to show in regular life. And because it's a game, you're allowed to do it. It's one of the only places you're actually allowed to do it. And when you show that piece of yourself in a social context and people go, we like that, right? We accept that, is like some of the deepest human stuff that can happen. And I think if we make products that do that, I think that honestly, those are really successful products, because what human doesn't want that feeling? And it goes a little bit beyond. I don't mean to shit on social media and all. It does go a little bit beyond that, though. It goes beyond the dopamine fulfillment part of it. And so I'm optimistic that a technology wave built on creativity that we're acknowledging, doing socially, playing together, creative play together, leads to a bunch of really great outcomes where people feel great about themselves, and those people go on to be creative and do work that's valuable. And I think that's really positive stuff.
I love that so in this conversation, we've confirmed that AI, this artificial intelligence, this artificial technology that a lot of people are really afraid about, this inhuman thing, is in fact at its core unlocking the innate human experience of play and connecting us as humans and creating a sense of belonging. I think there we go, right there. It's literally,
if we are in a simulation,
humanity.
If we are in a simulation and I am currently jacked into the Matrix, the machines are having a laugh right now.
All right, we've got it right here. This is this.
Yeah, I think those are great. How to say, ending statements? Actually,
there we go. Yeah. No, Andy, it has been fantastic to catch up with you again. We could have gone, as always, a lot more. I really feel there's a lot that we share in our perspective here, and you've already given me a bunch of ideas of, I need to do this next. I certainly came away with a bunch of learning. So thank you, Andy.
Thank you, guys. Can't wait to get back to work. I'm totally up energy. I have at least convinced myself that some of us are going to change the world for the better through AI games. That's either wildly delusional or we're doing something important. So thanks for the conversation. It was super interesting.
This was a lot of fun, Andy. Thank you so much.
Cool. See you guys.
See you, everybody.